Although 2050 is still a ways away, researchers are predicting what the future might look like, from the wacky to the alarming. Our world might look physically different, especially if the effects of climate change match what current models predict. Sea levels are expected to rise about 1 to 2 feet along the US coast, while some coral reefs might die off if bleaching episodes get worse. On land, we might have to deal with more frequent, larger wildfires. As more people live longer, the global population is set to hit 9.8 billion by 2050, and more people are expected to use more natural resources. One group predicts we'll use over 110 billion tons more by mid-century, about a 70% increase. But all those people might end up living most of their lives in a simulated world. Futurist Ian Pearson told Business Insider, technological advances might allow us to plug our brains into computers and live in a virtual reality. We might also add a layer of digital intelligence to our brain, something Tesla CEO Elon Musk is already looking into. Other advances might also revolutionize things like space travel and cars. Some researchers predict most vehicles on the road will be capable of autonomous driving and will run on anything from solar power to pressurized air. But all these predictions are just that, predictions. We didn't get flying cars by 2000, and we might not get them by 2050.
Now, in other news, the Korean government has vowed to take all-out measures to tackle the fine dust crisis in the country. Speaking at a parliamentary briefing on Wednesday, Environment Minister Kim Eun-kyung said, as the person in charge of the situation, she's sorry about the mounting public concern over the issue. She said Korea will be stepping up efforts with China, the origin of a lot of the dust, to step up research and cooperate in sharing technologies aimed at reducing the levels. This comes as more smoggy air has blanketed Korea. Most of the country is affected, but mainly Seoul, Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces will be subjected to the worst of the bad air quality throughout the day, with fine dust levels hovering between 80 to 100 micrograms per cubic metre, exceeding the average 50 micrograms of density. The Seoul city government is again waiving public transportation fees during peak commute hours, and authorities have also limited car use for public employees, public sector employees. It's the second time the government has enforced fine dust emergency reduction measures this year.
December was the darkest month on record in the Russian capital of Moscow. December is usually the darkest month of the year, with an average of 18 hours of sunshine. But the Weather Observatory at Moscow State University reported that the sun was hidden by clouds for all but 6 minutes last month. The previous record for darkness was in December 2000, when the sun shone for 3 hours, according to the Media Novosti weather website. The head of Russia's meteorological agency, Roman Vilfund, said the unusual cloudiness was caused by unusually warm temperatures and air masses moving in from the Atlantic Ocean. Now, the world's largest country is experiencing extremely low temperatures, especially in the Far East. Temperatures on January 15th dipped as low as minus 67 degrees Celsius. Residents posted photos of themselves on social media braving the cold. Some women even showed off their frozen eyelashes. For United News International, I'm Cambry Caldwell.
A 90-year-old woman is suing the US Air Force 62 years after she was kicked out of the service for being a lesbian. In 1955, Airman Second Class Helen Grace James and another female service member were followed by police from the base as they went to dinner. Days later, James was arrested, and after a lengthy interrogation, she was given an undesirable discharge because she was a lesbian. James was subjected to the investigation during a time known as the Lavender Scare, a Cold War-era persecution of gays and lesbians working for the US government. While James went on to become a successful physical therapist, she says the less than honourable discharge has prevented her from receiving veteran benefits. The lawsuit filed last week asked the court to upgrade her discharge to honourable. For United News International, I'm Rachel Latham.
Chelsea Manning, the transgender former U.S. Army intelligence analyst who was convicted of leaking classified documents, has announced her plan to run for a Senate seat in Maryland. 3 days after filing with federal election officials, Manning confirmed the bid by posting an ad campaign video to Twitter on January 14th.
I'm Chelsea Manning, and I approve this message.
Manning also tweeted a link for campaign contributions. Manning was sentenced to 35 years for releasing a trove of confidential military and State Department documents to WikiLeaks. Former President Barack Obama commuted her sentence before he left office, leading to her release in 2017. Manning has been an outspoken activist for LGBTQ rights since her release. Manning will run against two-term Senator Ben Cardin in the November Democratic primary. For United News International in Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
Que tanto flamean fiestas patrias, esta manchada de tanta sangre de mujeres.
30 in the morning here in the capital, Tehran. You're watching Press TV's Top 5. Many thanks for joining us this hour. Now, Palestinian leaders have voted to urge the Palestinian Liberation Organization to suspend its recognition of Israel. This comes weeks after the United States' unilateral decision to declare Jerusalem al-Quds as the Israeli capital.
We are condemning and rejecting the decision of U.S. President Donald Trump considering Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and transferring the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The Central Council decided that the transitional period stipulated in the agreement signed in Oslo, Cairo and Washington with its obligations no longer exist. The Central Council calls upon the international community to assume its responsibilities on the basis of relevant UN resolutions to end the occupation and enable the State of Palestine to achieve its independence.
The voting took place at the Palestinian Central Council, which is a high-ranking arm of the PLO. Those attending the council also demanded an immediate halt to the settlement activities in the occupied territories. Tensions are simmering across the Palestinian territories ever since U.S. President Donald Trump declared Jerusalem al-Quds as Israel's capital. Trump also said his government would be moving its embassy from Tel Aviv to al-Quds. The decision sparked widespread international condemnation, with many rebuking Trump for his provocative move.
Number 11 on the Open Doors World Watch list is India. Joining us to talk about what is fueling persecution in the world's largest democracy is Joseph D'Souza. He's Bishop of Good Shepherd Church and a human rights advocate who hails from the beautiful nation of India. Thank you so much for joining us again on the broadcast. Why is India so high up on the list, number 11?
I think we've had a very bad year in India.
2017 specifically was tough.
Yeah, 2017 was tough. And it's probably on the list because of the increased attacks at the local level from various subsets of the right-wing Hindu groups. And the incidents of attacks and persecution have increased in the last year.
What was it about the year 2017 that made it all the more difficult for believers in India?
There has been, it's not just related to the Christians, it's related also to the Muslims and Dalits and now also Hindus. There has been an increase in terms of violence across the nation in the last couple of years. Cow slaughter, and all of the lynchings and everything else. And then, of course, the propaganda that continues to go on, which is absolutely not correct, that Christians are involved in false and fraudulent conversions. Nothing of that sort is happening, and if it's happening, by now they should have been able to catch and prosecute, given all of the anti-conversion laws that are in the country, in the north. But the propaganda that somehow Christians are working against India and against the interests of India in trying to be Christians is what is propelling this. And a lack of control on these groups that seem to commit crimes or attack minorities with impunity because they think, oh, our party is in power, so we can go ahead and do what we want to do.
For many, many years, you have advocated social justice and freedom for what is known as the Dalit community, the so-called untouchables in India. Give us an update. What is God doing amongst the Dalits, amongst the so-called untouchables?
I think the part of the movement that we are, 25 years, we have come a long way.
Yeah.
And as I said that time, and I continue to say, that India cannot continue with the caste system. And India has to find, larger India has to find, all of the religions have to find, how do we get caste system within our religion out and stop the oppression of the Dalits. And while many Dalits have found freedom and dignity through Christian work in education and spiritual work and other kinds of things, the problem is not over.
In the midst of all these challenges, is the church growing, still growing?
The church has to grow in this kind of conflict. And you and I know that persecution has never stopped the growth of the church. In fact, when we are attacked, we are persecuted, we become stronger, and the faith of our North Indian brothers and sisters has to be seen, to be believed, and how they keep witnessing, not because of an external agenda. They have no foreign funding, nothing. They're local people. Yes, they're standing strong, and they're not recanting.
We will have to leave it there. As always, Dr. D'Souza, pleasure to have you back on the broadcast.
Welcome.
3 Chilean Catholic churches were attacked just hours after Pope Francis arrived in Santiago. 2 were burned to the ground near Temuco on Tuesday, January 16th. Another church located near Santiago was firebombed on Tuesday too, causing minor damage. 9 Chilean Catholic churches have been firebombed since Friday. No one has been hurt in the attacks, although threats have been made against the Pope. Reuters reports a pamphlet left at one of the churches attacked on Friday said, quote, "Pope Francis, the next bomb will be in your robe." The Catholic Church's child sex abuse scandal is largely responsible for the protests in Chile. On Tuesday, Francis spoke at the presidential palace before President Michelle Bachelet, diplomats and Catholic leaders. Francis said, quote, "I feel bound to express my pain and shame at the irreparable damage caused to children by some ministers of the Church." For United News International, I'm Rachel Latham.
For the first time in recorded history, the entire continental United States is experiencing what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention calls widespread influenza activity. When a flu outbreak happens, the virus that gets people sick in Alabama may not be the same strain in Washington. So some parts of the country may have rougher flu seasons than others, depending on the strain. The CDC said there are 2 reasons for this widespread activity. First, most people getting the flu are picking up the H3N2 strain, which is notorious for mutating so fast that vaccines can't keep up. This year's vaccine is thought to be just 32% effective at stopping H3N2. Second, some hospitals are poorly equipped to deal with H3N2 because of supply shortages outside of vaccines. For example, some parts of the U.S. don't have enough of the intravenous fluid that delivers medicine to patients because hurricanes damaged the facilities in Puerto Rico where it's made. And in the hardest hit parts of the U.S., there's not enough antiviral medication. Despite these shortages, the CDC did say that this season isn't expected to be as severe as the recent H3N2 dominated years. But there are still at least 11 weeks of flu season to go. So researchers are encouraging those who haven't had their flu shot to get one.
Deadly flu. The CDC today warning about this dangerous strain, and word tonight of a mother of 3, a marathon runner, who died within hours. ABC's Steve Osunsami is at the CDC.
The family of Katie Oxley Thomas tonight tells us they're pretty sure she got a flu shot this season, but it didn't protect her. Just 48 hours after she first started showing signs of the flu, this 40-year-old mother of 3 from California was dead.
This was like nothing I've ever seen.
This particular strain of flu that doctors are seeing most can be a quick killer. In Alabama, 38-year-old Adam York is suddenly fighting for his life tonight and needing a machine to breathe.
In a 24-hour period, he went from talking to me on the phone to being in the bed on these machines.
At the CDC today in Atlanta, health officials shared that 20 children across the country have died from the flu this winter. 7 of them reported just last week. One of them is a 4-year-old from Dayton, Ohio.
One of the most difficult things that I've ever had to do was tell my other children on Saturday morning that their little brother wasn't coming home.
Health officials here underline that the flu shot still works and that families should go out there and get them, pointing out that 80% of children who died from the flu last year weren't vaccinated.
Philippine volcano experts raised the warning level for Mount Mayon Sunday, January 14th, after lava began to flow and ash clouds appeared. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology raised the level to 3 from 2, meaning that a hazardous eruption is possible within weeks or days. Lava continued to flow down half a kilometer on Monday. Albay Province has been placed under state of calamity Tuesday as part of evacuees rose to at least 21,000. Officials have warned residents of possible lahars or mud flows, as well as toxic clouds of gas. Mayon, the nation's most active volcano, is about 340 kilometers southeast of Manila in the Albay Province. Mayon is one of 22 Philippine volcanoes that are part of the Ring of Fire, a string of volcanoes that ring the Pacific Ocean. Mayon's last fatal eruption was in 2013 when 5 climbers died. For United News International in Metro Manila, I am Crystal Ya.
This year, as you know, we suffered a terrible cholera epidemic and suspected cholera and acute watery diarrhea outbreak. And actually 1.5 million children continue to be malnourished in this country. Out of those, 400,000 suffer from severe acute malnutrition.
حتى النفسية مش حلوة، يعني تشوف اخواني يلعبوا تحاول ان تقوم تفلت، مثلا تقوم تشتي تشرب ولا حاجة. كان متعود ان لما تصحى الصباح قم تشرب الحالة وترجع تجي تنسي ان يعني رجلي مش موجود. قلة الدكاترة الحاجة تحصلها يعني بسيطة. أكثر من منظمة تحاول، بس يعني حاجة دعم إنه يعني كمساعدة إنه يبدل رجل أو حاجة مثلا اصطناعية أو حاجة زي كده لحد الآن مش موجود.
Saudi Arabia has launched a fresh airstrikes in Yemen, causing more death and destruction. The latest attacks targeted a farm in Al Jarahi Directorate of Hodeidah province in the country's west. 2 farmers were killed and 3 others wounded in the air raids. Earlier, Saudi warplanes bombed Al Khoja Directorate in the same province, killing 4 farmers. Saudi Arabia and its allies started their deadly aggression against Yemen in March 2015. The war has so far killed over 13,700 Yemenis, many of them women and children. Prominent human rights groups have repeatedly accused Saudi Arabia of committing war crimes in its southern neighbor. Yemen is facing a humanitarian crisis amid Saudi Arabia's all-out siege of the war-ravaged country.
bridge collapse in central Colombia has killed at least 10 people. The victims were all workers on the Chirrahara Bridge, which was under construction and not in operation when it collapsed Monday, January 15th. 9 of the workers were killed instantly, while the 10th died at the hospital. They were roughly 280 meters high when they fell. The construction company behind the work has already identified the first 9 victims and offered its condolences to their families. Additional injuries were also reported, and emergency crews returned to the site Tuesday for a second day of search and recovery efforts. The Chirrahara Bridge spans nearly 450 meters over a gorge on the highway between Bogota and Villavicencio. Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos expressed his support for the victims' families in a tweet. Meanwhile, the National Infrastructure Agency will launch an investigation to find out what caused the deadly collapse. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
Twin suicide bombings killed dozens of people January 15th at a street market in central Baghdad. Iraqi police and health officials said the attacks in Tehran Square left 38 dead and 105 wounded. 2 assailants wearing suicide vests blew themselves up at around 6 a.m. as vendors were starting their workday. So far, no group has claimed responsibility for the blasts, but some security officials suspect it was the work of the Islamic State. Iraqi Parliament Speaker Salim El-Jabouri described the suicide blasts as a, quote, cowardly act against innocent people. He went on to urge the government to take necessary security precautions. Attacks in the capital city have become less frequent since Iraqi forces drove IS from its last remaining territories in the country last month. However, there are concerns the number of attacks may increase in the coming months, with elections in the country set for May. For United News International, I'm Mila Uni.
The situation in eastern Idlib is rapidly becoming more and more complicated for government forces, as both ISIS and Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, are simultaneously pressuring the Syrian Arab Army, SAA, and its allies. On January the 15th, ISIS captured a dozen villages southwest of the Abu al-Duhur air base and conducted several hit-and-run attacks on government troops in the areas of Uwajat Khana and Razm Khurshuf. Separately, clashes between HTS and the SAA continued in Mihar, Abu Omar, Astan, Shamhawa, Salumiya, Tal Khazna, and nearby points. Government forces launched a counter-attack to repel the HTS advance in the area, and by January 16th they had regained some positions, including Astan. In southern Aleppo, government troops regained Khobor, Abu Ruwaij, and entered Mahamya and Tal Shahid. According to pro-militant sources, government forces lost up to 30 fighters and at least 2 vehicles in the recent clashes, mainly in militant attacks on ill-prepared positions of SAA troops southwest of Abu al-Duhur. The recent advances of ISIS and the ongoing counter-attack of HTS pose the threat of cutting off units of the SAA's Tiger forces, deployed south of the airbase, from their counterparts in northeastern Hama. The Syrian military is now deploying reinforcements to the area in order to prevent this scenario. The rapid expansion of ISIS in the area also shows that more and more so-called moderate rebels paint their flags in black and join the terrorist faction in eastern Idlib and northeastern Hama. This once again reveals the real face of the so-called moderate opposition in Idlib. On January 15th and 16th, Turkish forces carried out multiple strikes on the positions of Kurdish militias in the area of Afrin. Turkey's President Erdogan once again threatened to launch a military operation in the area and vowed to drown the so-called terror army, which is now being formed by Washington with the help of US-backed forces under the name of the Border Force. This is what we have to say to all our allies. Don't get between us and terrorist organizations, or we will not be responsible for the unwanted consequences, Erdogan said, adding that Turkish forces will battle until not a single terrorist remains along our borders, let alone 30,000 of them. The rift between Washington and Ankara deepens as the US is not going to abandon its support to Kurdish-dominated forces in northern Syria.
The Hawaii employee who accidentally triggered an alert for an incoming ballistic missile Saturday has been temporarily reassigned pending an investigation into the incident. A spokesperson for the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency did not say exactly what the employee is doing now, but noted the new rule does not provide access to the warning system. As we previously reported, the false alarm was sent out to the people of Hawaii after the employee accidentally pushed the wrong button during an internal test. There's a safeguard meant to prevent this sort of thing from happening, but the employee clicked through it. While Hawaii is making some changes to its system, the Federal Communications Commission is already investigating the mishap. In a statement, FCC Chairman Ajit Pai called the incident absolutely unacceptable. He noted false alerts undermine public confidence in the alerting system and thus reduce their effectiveness during real emergencies. On Sunday, President Donald Trump suggested federal officials would now get involved in Hawaii's alert system, but he commended state authorities for taking responsibility for the error.
Japanese broadcaster NHK has apologized for issuing a false alarm about a North Korean missile launch. NHK sent the alert to its Japanese smartphone apps and website just before 7 p.m. Tuesday, January 16th. It falsely indicated North Korea had likely launched a missile and warned people to take cover. A second alert corrected the mistake 5 minutes later, and Japan's national public broadcaster issued an on-air apology. NHK blamed a switching error but did not elaborate. According to Reuters, there were no immediate reports of panic or disruption following Tuesday's false alarm. That was not the case Saturday morning in Hawaii, where the state emergency agency accidentally sent a similar alert that wasn't corrected for nearly 40 minutes. The employee who pressed the wrong button in Hawaii has been reassigned, and Governor David Ige has ordered a comprehensive review of the state's emergency response system. For United News International, I'm Matt
Washington
Paul.
and Tokyo are extending their existing nuclear cooperation deal. This allows Japan to continue reprocessing spent nuclear fuel, meaning increased amount of plutonium in that country. Cha Sang-mi has the full story.
The United States and Japan have decided to let their current nuclear cooperation pact renew automatically, which will allow Tokyo to keep reprocessing spent nuclear fuel. Japan's Mainichi Shimbun reported Tuesday that the two nations' 30-year nuclear cooperation agreement, which was to expire this July, is confirmed as extended, since neither side proposed revising or terminating it 6 months prior to the deadline. The agreement came into effect in July 1988. Its renewal raises question about the increasing amount of plutonium in Japan, which can be reprocessed to use again as fuel, or to make nuclear weapons. Japan is pushing for a so-called nuclear fuel recycling policy for plutonium, but the country has no immediate use for it since its reactors were switched off after the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011. On the other hand, a nuclear specialist says a single warhead requires 5 kilograms of plutonium, and Japan has 50 tons, enough for almost 10,000 nuclear bombs. But the expert says
it's not going to pose any new threat to the international community. The threat has already been there. It's been like a clear and present danger for so many years, maybe 25 years. But I'm guessing that there could be some ways of converting plutonium-239 to reactor-usable material.
the Japanese government has insisted it will not hold on to any plutonium, not for the use by the international community. The fact that its stockpiles continue to grow could provoke criticism. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Britain's Royal Air Force scrambled 2 fighter jets to intercept Russian bombers near UK airspace on Monday, in the latest incident highlighting ongoing tensions in the region. On January 15th, the RAF said that it scrambled Typhoon aircraft from an airbase in Scotland on a quick reaction alert as 2 Tupolev Tu-160 Blackjack bombers approached Britain. The Blackjacks were monitored as they flew past Norway and Denmark and near the Netherlands before the British jets picked them up roughly 30 miles from UK airspace. Monday's incident is the latest in recent years as Russian aircraft continue to test British and NATO air defenses. Russia's defense ministry in a statement Monday said, quote, all flights by Russian aircraft are performed in strict accordance with international rules for using airspace without infringement on any country's borders. For United News International in Washington, D.C., I'm Caitlin Mangum.
I also have a reproach against NATO. Hey, NATO, you are obligated to take a stance against those who harass, violate the borders of your members. What kind of stance have you taken so far?
This is Kashmir, a region disputed between Pakistan and India. Once again, the region is at the center of attention as a fresh round of border tension erupts between two neighbors. Islamabad says 4 of its soldiers were killed by Indian forces, adding that Pakistani forces responded by killing 3 Indian soldiers. But India's military says it was Pakistani forces who fired first and that no casualties were recorded on the Indian side. At the heart of border tension is the ongoing uprising in Indian-controlled Kashmir. Many people in the disputed region have been killed over the past 1.5 years. Kashmiris are seeking freedom from India under UN Security Council resolutions which call for a referendum in the disputed region.
These are Indian attempts to divert the international attention from the grave human rights violations being perpetrated by the Indian occupation forces in the Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan military has given a befitting response to all such Indian attempts.
Fresh clashes followed a warning by Indian Army against Pakistan's threat of use of nuclear weapons. It said Pakistan's weapons would not stop Indian forces from crossing over de facto border. India accuses Pakistan of encouraging militants to launch attacks on Indian-controlled Kashmir. Pakistan denies the allegations and also threatens to use its nuclear arsenal against what it calls any possible Indian aggression on its eastern borders.
Pakistan's nuclear weapons are for the deterrence. And that deterrence means because India's size in conventional war is larger than Pakistan's 7 to 8 times, that means a smaller power would have to defend itself with the minimum credible deterrence.
In addition to nuclear warheads, Pakistan says it has manufactured small nuclear devices which it plans to use in case an attack by India. Analysts believe that both nuclear-armed countries can effectively destroy each other, but repercussion of a nuclear war could have a spillover effects in the region. Javed Rana, Press TV, Islamabad.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov threw his weight behind the Iran nuclear deal during his annual press conference on Monday. In his diplomatic roundup of the year 2017, Lavrov accused the United States and its allies of issuing ultimatums to get what they want. Lavrov said Moscow will not support attempts by Washington to modify the Iran nuclear deal. U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to reimpose nuclear sanctions on Iran unless there are modifications to the existing deal.
We will continue our efforts to make the U.S. accept reality. And the reality is that Iran has been fulfilling all its obligations under the JCPOA, which has been regularly verified by the IAEA's Director General, while the International Atomic Energy Agency has not voiced a single concern in relation to Iran's obligations under the nuclear deal.
Lavrov referred to the deal as one of the most important achievements made by the global community and called Washington's attempt to introduce a fresh package of sanctions against Iran regrettable.
прискорбно, потому что...
All this is regrettable, as in a few months there will be another review, and if the U.S. indeed slams the door on it, I don't even want to think of the consequences. Certainly in this situation, Iran won't consider that it has to be committed to the JCPOA.
The top Russian diplomat once again stressed Russia's opposition to U.S. proposed amendments to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action.
Пытаются сделать Соединенные Штаты.
What the United States is trying to do to amend the text of the deal by including issues that are absolutely unacceptable for Iran. We won't back this.
The foreign minister says that the best way for Russia to stay ahead of the game is through responsible politics and international cooperation. Russia has been strengthening ties with its neighbors and has established a strategic partnership with Iran. And when it comes to the US, Russia says it wants constructive dialogue and mutual respect. Marina Kartunova, Press TV, Moscow.
North Korean state media lashed out Tuesday at U.S. President Donald Trump's recent tweet about having a bigger nuclear button on his desk than Kim Jong-un's. A commentary in Rodong Shinmun, the ruling party's publication, called the tweets the spasm of a lunatic and the bark of a rabid dog, according to a translation by the Wall Street Journal. The war of words between Kim and Trump escalated on New Year's Day when Kim said the entire U.S. mainland is within range of its nuclear missiles. And, quote, the nuclear button is on my office desk all the time. The next day, Trump responded on Twitter, quote, I too have a nuclear button, but it is a much bigger and more powerful one than his, and my button works. Tensions between the two countries are rising, even as North and South Korea engage in diplomatic talks. For United News International, I'm Matt Paul.
President Xi Jinping reportedly spoke on the phone with his American counterpart Donald Trump on Tuesday. The Chinese leader described the current easing of tensions on the Korean peninsula as hard-earned, that all parties need to continue working towards dialogue and negotiation. According to China's state broadcaster CCTV, Xi stressed that Beijing is willing to maintain close communication, mutual trust and respect with Washington and the international community in dealing with Pyongyang. He is also said to have commented on the positive progress in Washington-Beijing relations over the last year, that it brought benefits especially in the economic and trade sectors. The details of the call have yet to be confirmed by the White House. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, on his way to the Vancouver summit on Tuesday, reiterated that military options need to be made apparent as well to help reinforce diplomatic efforts.
So, here we go. There we are.
We discussed the importance of working together to counter sanctions evasion and smuggling. And we also issued a call to action to strengthen global maritime interdiction operations to foil illicit ship-to-ship transfers.
U.S. and Canada now hosting a meeting with other nations, various nations now, on the North Korea nuclear threat today, in fact. Rex Tillerson is there. He's in Vancouver. James Mattis is there as well. All coming days after a false alarm about an incoming ballistic missile created panic for 38 minutes in the state of Hawaii. John Bolton, former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Senior Fellow, American Enterprise Institute, Fox News contributor. How are you, sir? And
good morning.
Good morning to you. You think anything comes from this? China's not there, by the way. South Korea is. Japan is there. What comes from it?
Well, I think it's important, obviously, given Canada's geographic location, as well as the integrated North American Air Defense Command we have with them, to talk about the threat from North Korea, since obviously on the day that North Korea gets the ability to hit targets in the United States, they'll be able to hit targets in Canada as well. So I think this is a good opportunity to keep a close ally informed. I don't expect that anything more will come from it, but it's important work to do.
And keep it on the table. I think a lot of these countries, based on what I'm reading, they do not want to step on this matter between the North and South prior to the Olympics, almost as if they feel like there's a bit of momentum there. The White House is saying we're the ones that are driving this issue, and we're the ones that are responsible for driving them toward one another. What is your view on that, sir?
Well, I think North Korea has unquestionably appreciated that the Trump administration is not the same as its predecessor, and that the possibility of military force is a much more real threat from this administration than from Barack Obama. But at the same time, I believe this entire Olympic ploy is nothing but propaganda. I don't think anything serious will come of it. I think they're taking advantage of South Korea's desire not to have the Olympics spoiled. As they were to an extent in 1988. It's nothing new from North Korea. They've marched in subsequent Olympics with the South Korean team. So I think the nuclear question still remains bubbling day after day.
A boy who survived the Texas church massacre is healing with the help of well wishes from strangers in the form of greeting cards.
It just uplifts everybody. Everybody's been so wonderful in what they've said and written. It's amazing.
5-year-old Ryland Ward was shot 5 times at the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs. His stepmother and 2 of his sisters died in the attack. Ryland's grandmother says it's been a long road to recovery for the once active child, who looks forward to the day he can leave the hospital where he's been since the shooting last month.
But he was hurting and not feeling good, so I was just trying to do something to get his mind off of everything. And we started talking about things he wants when he gets out of the hospital. And when I got to go-kart, he was like, oh, said go-kart. His eyes got real big and he was all excited and everything.
So Sandy reached out to her Facebook friends, asking them to send Ryland cards with $1 in them. She says as the money grows, he gets more and more excited about getting to buy his go-kart. But she says Ryland is more excited to know that people all across the country are thinking about him.
We've had people sending pictures of their pets and of their kids and grandkids, and he loves seeing those. There's more good people in the world than bad, because that's what he's been through, and all these people, love him and are praying for him.